So a common problem out on site and on training for that matter, especially if you hire this sort of equipment in, is that you can end up with a gauge which is just below the acceptance level on the cylinder pressure. And this is essentially often caused by rapid charging of these sets, and then as they cool down, the air inside contracts a little bit and it just drops it down below the thing. This can also be an issue, of course, if you're out on site for long periods of time with the same equipment. So it's good practice, and you'll be told on training that you only accept and use a set if it's in the green zone. But it's also good practice perhaps to have the ability to top these sets up. And this is something that essentially is fairly easy for an end user to do with minimal training. So I'm going to take you through how to do that now. So the first thing is what we're going to do is we need to make entry into the set. They usually have some kind of company tag on them, and if they've been inspected before they're issued out, they'll have an anti-tamper tag here. We're just going to break that tag so that we can get into the set. When you open the lid, you have to be really careful, okay, because effectively there will be a clip here that's connecting the automatic bayonet fitting on the pillar valve. So you want to disconnect that. These are often worth checking because I've had these from hire companies where they haven't been connected. But then you can open the set up. What we're dealing with here, of course, is a Constand Flow set, so we're going to have a hood inside, but the principles remain pretty similar if you're dealing with a positive pressure set. So now we can get to the workings of the set inside, and effectively what we want to do is just expose the fill port here. What we can then do is take the blanking plug off so that we can connect up to this cylinder and just top it off. Keep that off to one side because you're going to need that later on. What you will need is a decant hose, okay, or a whip to connect between a master cylinder and the escape set you're trying to top off. And this needs to have a 200 DIN fitting on it, so 200 bar DIN fitting on it. We carry these in the training centre, and then we take them out on site when we're doing jobs as well, so that the staff on site can just top them up. Protect the threads and the O-rings with just a little plastic cap, which you can get very easily from the supplier. And then it's a question of just carefully, because they're very fine threads, don't be tempted to lubricate these threads, connecting up to there, make sure that helps. Now, before we go much further, it's good practice, of course, whenever you are working with pneumatics, to wear safety glasses. So I'm just going to pop my safety glasses on now at this point, before we start exposing any of this to a charge pressure. My set then there is all connected up, ready to go. The pin is still in place. If you try and charge these with this pin detached and in the lid, all you're going to do is just bleed air straight the way through the system and out through the hood. You're then going to need a master cylinder to charge up from. Your master cylinder clearly needs to have a higher pressure in it than you want to get to here. And this is why you need a risk assessment for doing this, because these 6.8 litre standard SCBA cylinders are charged to 300 bar, and maximum charge in this is 200 bar. So it's not something you can just plug in and walk away from. You can now connect the other end of the whip into the supply cylinder. You don't need to over tighten these fittings, you just screw them down finger tight. Now effectively we're ready to go. So we've got our supply cylinder all hooked up, and we've got the set that we're charging. We check that the dump valve is closed and the fittings are where we want to be. And then really you want to keep an eye on this gauge here. And all we're going to do is we're just going to crack this cylinder open and very slowly start allowing air into here. And we're going to watch the needle come up. And I've just crept it up to 220 bar there, which is the top of the charge zone for this particular cylinder. Right, so that set now is topped off and ready to be issued out. To disconnect all of this, once we've got to the pressure we want, we've shut the pillar valve on the supply cylinder, but this is all still pressurized through here. Right, provided that clips in, all right, then this valve on here will automatically lock, and it's just a question of then dumping the air out of the whip. To depressurize it, and then close it again so you don't get any damp air creeping back in. Clearly, if you haven't shut this valve, you're just going to dump this whole cylinder out through that process. You can then disconnect. And put your protection cap back on there. We're now effectively finished, unless we've got another cylinder we need to do. And we can come back to this one, put the blanking plate back in, to protect the threads, and then the set can be just put back inside its bag. It's helpful to have, for your manufacturer, a resetting tool so that you can hold that valve closed and get the bayonet fitting back in, just in case you've accidentally pulled that. You want to check that the valve is properly seated in the cover, and then it's just a question of repacking the bag. Right, so what you do is you send a loop of the hose down the cylinder, put the hood sideways on, and then fold the material underneath the visor so that the hood sits sideways in on top there without any kinks in the visor at all. If this was going back straight onto site now, as we bring the lid over, we need to connect up that D-ring and then put a fresh anti-tamper tag through the system to make sure it's all on site. But here at ISAR 3, what we do is we store these with these disconnected, because we've had too many times where they've been handled on site and ripped. And so we have a procedure when we're working and when we're training, when the instructor or the technician on site will check these every morning before they're issued out to the client to use. So we leave them disconnected in storage, and you'll know once the tag's back in there that the thing is good to go. So that's that set charged up. You can see already there's been a 5-bar drop on that just from the charge off. All right, and that set's now ready to go back into service. What you should do to be compliant with all your regulations is keep a record of which cylinder you charge this off. And so we charge this off 0735, 03735, which I charged up off our compressor this morning. And now I'll just make an entry in here for this particular set. So I want the serial number 1605. Cylinder capacity is 3 litres, and VS charged it this morning. And that means that if there is a problem with any of the air supply, because perhaps there's a fault on the compressor, we know which cylinders we've charged off our compressor and which cylinders we've topped up off our compressor. So we've got complete traceability through there. And that's a requirement. You should be doing that for all your stuff. Sometimes that's difficult to achieve if you're hiring stuff in. The last thing to say about this is that these sets are well worth keeping topped up. Effectively, they're an emergency escape system, so they're going to give the wearer a duration, and the constant flow sets typically come in either 10-minute or 15-minute duration. All right, and so once that air's gone, all right, then you don't have that protection anymore. They're used by workers in safe conditions in a confined space, but it's an emergency air supply for if the conditions become contaminated in the confined space. So every minute counts. All right, and these 15-minute sets are charged to 200 bar, or 200 times atmosphere, and they are a 3-litre cylinder. So to find out how much air is in your set, all you need to do is multiply those two numbers together, and that will give you 600 litres of air in that set if it's fully charged. So to work out just the difference, so if it should be at 200, and say for example it's at 180 when I accept it on site, right, then all I need to do is understand what 10 bar looks like. So 10 bar pressure, okay, times 3 litres will give me 30 litres of air. All right, and the discharge rate on this when they're set off the valve are typically set between 38 and 40 litres a minute. So if I'm losing 40 litres per minute and I've got 30 litres for 10 bar, okay, 20 bar drop on here is going to take effectively 1.5 minutes from my endurance, which if I've got a 15-minute set, that's 10% of my survival air. Keep them topped up. If you haven't got any of this equipment, you need to access it, you can talk to your local supplier or your local dive shop. These components are fairly easy to get hold of, and make sure you keep your sets topped up. Right, thank you very much.